So sports radio did a big governor's debate. They didn't invite, the Democrats. They did invite, or the independents. They did invite the Republicans, okay, which is actually a pretty fair forum considering I would think that Matt Jones is more liberal than most of the media figures here. So the debate happened. Right, the Matt Jones had the debate, and here I edited a lot of the audio, but this is the shortest synopsis of what actually happened. So first off, you have Will T, and he's talking about how he's good for the veterans. That was one of the greatest things actually about Will T, was him jumping out of that airplane and then said, hey, when are you other guys going to jump out of the airplane? Will T jumped out of an airplane in order to get media attention. That is how crappy the media in Kentucky is. You have to jump, and they didn't even do a good job of that, right? He had to jump out of the plane and then talk about his issues.
But I promised them that my administration in Kentucky would be veteran friendly. We will keep the veterans' preference, higher points, and we're going to have a $5,000 exemption, annual exemption for the veterans. You can put it on your car tax, or you can put it on your home tax.
I'm all Will T. Will T and me are basically hillbillies pretending to be intellectuals, and Jack Conway and Matt Bevin are intellectuals trying to be hillbillies. Here we have Matt Bevin talking about how he supports the right to work, the right to scab.
MattBevin.com, MattBevin.com, where you can read my blueprint for a better Kentucky. It is very specific. It talks about job creation. It talks about cutting taxes. It talks about right to work legislation. It talks about health care and education in the state. The very things we need to do, regardless of who you're pulling for. We're all here in Kentucky, and we all need and want the same things for our children and grandchildren going forward. I look forward to the next hour.
And it is about destroying unions. It's all about union busting, going to war on the middle, working, poor, and homeless classes of Kentucky. When Matt Jones asked the question, do you like Rand Paul or Mitch McConnell more, which one would you identify with? Hal Heiner refused to answer the question. He wouldn't actually say one or the other. Hal Heiner's a weird, skeevy, creepy dude. Hal Heiner reminds me of Jafar when he sniffed jasmine.
You have to choose. If you were to describe yourself, are you more of a Rand Paul Republican or a Mitch McConnell Republican?
Rand Paul, no question. He's a believer in the Constitution at every turn. He's somebody who believes in limited government. He's a guy who has come from the people. He wasn't the chosen one. In fact, the establishment long worked against him. There are many similarities. He's also a guy who has been in the working class his entire life, and then decided to step forward as a public servant, not somebody who has burnished his career or made himself wealthy at the expense of the average citizen in Kentucky. So Rand Paul, without any question.
Rand Paul, he went through a campaign where he fought a lot of the same people that I'm having to fight in the campaign. Then he overcame a lot of negative ads that were proven to be untrue. The Aqua Buddha, for example. That's something that Rand had to endure during his campaign, but the truth prevailed, and Rand Paul emerged as a winner, and he's represented Kentucky well.
Mr. Scott.
Rand Paul.
Now here are the answers to the governor's candidates when they asked if they want drug testing for all the students and the employees and the politics, basically everybody. Do you want to drug test everybody?
Drug testing every single student is cost prohibitive. Let's be honest, it truly is. I'm a former military officer. I used to get randomly drug tested. My job was to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That was my sworn duty. That was my responsibility, and I got randomly drug tested. I think we should have random drug tests. With respect to which schools, I'll leave that up to the school administrations. I think they should decide, but I certainly would be supportive of that.
So you would be in favor of that. What about for just drug testing state employees?
I think we should randomly drug test state employees. I think we should randomly drug test every single person who receives benefits from this state in the form of Medicaid or SNAP benefits or whatever the case may be. And if you fail that random drug test, you lose your benefits, period.
So employees, students, and benefit them.
I think we have a drug problem in this state, and if we want to be serious about addressing it, let's stop making it a safe environment for certain groups of people to be able to participate in extracurricular activities that aren't good for them.
I would want my children when they were in high school to be drug tested, and with respect to public employees, I think they should be drug tested. I sponsored legislation, co-sponsored legislation with Representative Lonnie Napier several years ago in the General Assembly to drug test welfare recipients. to try to reduce the number of people on the welfare rolls in the state. We have a huge drug problem in the state. I believe all government employees and politicians. I think if you had a drug testing kit here, I would volunteer.
That
to
would
take a
add
drug
some
test.
intrigue to this.
But you cannot designate a class in Kentucky under the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of this Commonwealth, and say we're going to drug test everybody in that class. I mean, you have to have an articulable, reasonable reason to say that justifies testing somebody. Now, having said that, let me tell you, the cost is absolutely phenomenal. We spend $5,300 in our drug courts, and the biggest per year per participant, and the biggest cost is drug testing. And with the new drugs they're creating every day, we're missing a lot of them. We have to keep changing our testing. You can't afford it, and it's demeaning to 99% of the kids that don't take it.
All right, Mr. Heiner.
Yep. I do support random drug testing.
Matt Jones asked about Connect, what they would do with Connect. They would all dismantle Obamacare. So the Republicans want to get their hands on our women. They want to get their hands on our health care. They want to get their hands on our education. Do you really trust them in their hands on our economy? Remember when they almost blew up the world, nearly blew up the world in 2008?
Well, no, it will not remain in place.
Mr. Scott.
Man, I'm going to pull it down.
Mr. Heiner.
Yeah. I am opposed to Obamacare. I am for the repeal of Obamacare.
But I will dismantle the Connect program in the state of Kentucky.
With their casino-style capitalism, it's insane, actually, that they would be against casinos when they're in favor of the corporations, the 1% and the bankers being as casino-horrific as possible. You know, casino-style, laissez-faire, dog-eat-dog, who gives a damn, right? If you are able to pollute and get away with it, then you rock.
Would Kentucky be able to have casinos, Mr. Heiner?
No.
Mr. Bevan?
No.
Mr. Comer?
No.
Mr. Scott?
Absolutely. It's the only way to pay down our $34 billion unfunded pension liability to 360,000 families, and we promised it for 60 years.
They asked all the candidates about medical marijuana. You have a guy named Terrell something who changed his name to Gatewood Galbraith, who is in favor of legalizing marijuana, an independent candidate. You have Drew Curtis, who is in favor of medical marijuana. You have Hal Heiner, who is something. Here's what their positions were, okay?
I'm for what science. If science says it's good for Kentuckians, I'm fine with it.
Okay, Mr. Heiner.
I'm for it when the FDA approves it and it's sold at the local pharmacy.
Okay, so yes, Mr. Bevan.
Yes, if treated like every other prescription drug with doctor approval.
Mr. Comer.
No, and I'm going to tell you why. We unveiled two companies that have located in Kentucky yesterday in Lexington that are making this from hemp and not marijuana. I've proposed making hemp a reality in the state, so there's a better way to do that.
Okay, essentially 6 of the 8 candidates are in favor of medical marijuana. The only 2 people that's not in favor of it, James Comer, because he wants to protect the hemp industry, and Jack Conway, because he's made his living off of fucking people over, calling people felons and smashing their faces in. And that's not criminal, right? You won't hear old motherfucking Joe Gurr saying shit about that. So then they asked the question, who of you are still the bigots? Which one of you guys are bigoted, homophobic pieces of shit? And the bigots, they asked about gay marriage, okay? Right now in Kentucky, if you have gay sex 3 times, it is a felony. It's a felony. That law is still on the books today. I read this study actually too that had said that the people that are most turned on by gay porn are the homophobes. So, GOP candidates, which one of you assholes are still bigoted? Which one of you assholes are secretly gay, homophobic people? Which one of you Republican candidates secretly want to suck dick?
Mr. Bevan.
No, and 74% of us voted that way 10 years ago.
Mr. Comer.
No.
Mr. Scott.
No.
Mr. Heiner.
No.
All right. Would you enact Kentucky a law like was enacted in Indiana, which extended the Religious Freedom Act to businesses as opposed to individuals? That controversy from a couple months ago. Mr. Comer.
Yes.
Mr. Scott.
We already have it.
We have it for individuals. We don't have it for businesses.
Then yes, I would add the businesses.
Okay. Mr. Heiner.
Yeah. I believe businesses are already covered, but the answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay.
They asked what the number 1 priority is for each one of these candidates. For Will T. Scott, it was about building prisons, minimum security prisons.
We can have minimum security prisons behind our drug courts, make a great partnership. We can increase recovery 70%, and we can be safe again in Kentucky.
Mr. Hyder.
We absolutely have to grow jobs in the state.
Mr. Bevan.
We do need to create jobs, no question about it.
Ms. Combs.
My number one priority is to create jobs in the state.
When they asked the candidates which coach did they like, you had Will T. Scott and James Comer, who said that they're in favor of Calipari. And then you had Matt Bevin and Hal Heiner say that they liked Rick Pitino. Now, Matt Jones, I think he had a little crush on Matt Bevin because he asked him, do you understand which show you're on? Well, I don't know if Matt Jones understands this, but Rick Pitino actually won UK a championship. Did you know that, Matt? Did you know that Rick Pitino won a championship for UK? Matt Jones asked Matt Bevin about cockfighting. He asked what his position was on cockfighting, and Matt Bevin says that it's not a federal issue, but a state issue. He wouldn't say that he supported a ban on cockfighting, so he's in favor of cockfighting, and he's kind of running away from this issue. It's, that is not an issue I'm going to run on. He didn't run on casinos, says that we don't have a right to gamble, but we have a right to put a bunch of chickens together, sadistically claw at each other for our, sort of barbaric entertainment. When Matt Jones asked James Comer if he ever lost his temper, James Comer said he never lost his temper. Not even once with Marilyn Thomas. And so I feel like he has evolved into a better person. Also, they're working on being the governor. The governor has a monopoly on the violence. Not only do they control all the purse strings, but they have a monopoly on the violence. They got a monopoly. So that means whenever, not only do they have to handle all of Kentucky's women, but they got to handle all of Kentucky's men. And they're going to do it with the state power. So it is through violence. So it's kind of weird. It's like you can get the state power and then bash over, a pothead's, face in. Nobody bats an eye. That's okay. That's the way business is done around here, boy. We have a police force around here, and violence is totally acceptable and normal when they use it. And so they vindicate the violent domestic psychopaths. So, these people out of Gouth County would vote for James Comer just because he did that. Right? Wow. What a man. What a man. He forced her, told her to listen. They would respect that. So, I do not cover up for James Comer for what he did. I think that this issue coming out the way that it did, and then the media just saying, his whole campaign's fucked. He did he messed up 20-something years. This whole campaign is fucked. Nah, fuck you. The media is irrelevant. In Louisville, they pointed out that the worst judge in all of Louisville. And they wanted to kick her out, right? They published an article saying who the worst judge in all Louisville was. She still won her seat. So even when the media is unanimous in their decision about who should step down, it doesn't matter. The media's reporting doesn't help or go against the candidates. Will T. Scott says that in 1972, Kentucky was a drug-free society.
Well, Matt, the people have to understand in 72, we had 2,700 people in all the prisons in Kentucky and 3.3 million population. You fast forward 2010, we grew 25% to 4.4 million, but our prison population went up to 23,000. Yeah, I say 70% of those. And it's down to 21,000 now after Bill 463 and 15. But I say 70% of those 21,000 are there for addiction-related problems that our prison is not addressing at all.
So do you
and when
think
they come out, they rob us again.
Do you think
drug-free? Well, that's total bullshit. He's pointing out the prison population. He said in 1972 we only had a prison population of about 2,000. Now we have a prison population of 23,000. So we've increased, 2,000%. And so he's wondering why that is. Well, he thinks that there's no drugs in the 70s and the 60s. I don't know if he remembers the 60s and 70s, but that's the freedom movement, Black Panthers, that's Weather Underground, that's the hippies, that's Woodstock, that's Vietnam. That's, there was lots of drugs. That's where the drug culture was born. And so I noticed that in 1972, the thing that had actually began was Nixon's war on drugs. Nixon's war on drugs was in 1971. 1971. That's when Nixon's war on drugs began, and then that's when we started throwing more people into prison. While we may have a drug addiction problem, we have more of a poverty problem. 1 million people are impoverished, lack of jobs, lack of good jobs, and the only thing that's addicted, the biggest addiction comes out of the government's addiction to the war on drugs. They are addicted to the war on drugs. They make a lot of money for the prosecutors, for the jailers, for anybody else that wants to go ahead and victimize people who never hurt anybody else. And so I think that's fucked up. You hurt somebody that didn't hurt anybody else, that makes you the criminal. You're the bad guy.
Is drug addiction. In 72, we were a drug-free society.
So it wasn't a drug-free society in 1972. The drug war began in 1971. That's the difference. Here, Matt Bevin says the word surliest. He's got a hell of a vocabulary. I asked him about the food fight ad, and he says that he wanted to add some levity to the race.
You, however, absolutely believe that Hal Heiner has surrounded himself with the surliest and sorriest group of people who have smeared and assassinated other people in this race, and he can sit here and tell people that he has said nothing but positive things. His former campaign manager is behind all of this noise, and people should be well aware of that.
So you do believe Mr. Heiner was behind the Comer story?
I don't know if he's behind the Comer story, but I'm telling you, his people have been pushing this for a long time, and Hal himself has personally told me months and months ago, before I even got in this race, that he knew things, not had heard things, that he knew things based on conversation that his people had about Jamie Comer. You told me that yourself, Hal. You told me in your office, to my face. The reality is Hal Heiner is not who he pretends to be.
So what we're seeing is someone that's saying he's against attacks at the same time that he is attacking. He's saying he's against Obamacare, but he wants to move all the Kentuckians to Obamacare. He says he's for less government. He's against bailouts, but his own business, he takes bailouts. He'll say anything to get elected.
Matt Jones asked if another candidate wins, will you support that candidate? And James Comer says he probably won't support Hal Heiner. Matt Bevin says he thinks that all the candidates that's running in the Republican race are better than Jack Conway. Will T. Scott and James Comer both, again, doubled down on the gay marriage. They were real pissed off at Jack Conway because they are, secretly gay, and they secretly want to suck dicks, and they think that, hell, dicks might taste delicious, so I better hate this thing so then everybody else knows that I'm not gay. Well, it turns out you're the gayest. If you're homophobic, you are the biggest gay person out here. And so Will T. Scott was mad about the gay marriage, and so is James Comer. I understand the rule of law. I get that. And Matt Bevin actually said something about it, too. He said, we voted that way in 2004.
Scott.
Well, I'll ask Jamie this question. I've given thousands of constitutional oaths to people, and Kentucky expects people to comply with them. But the constitutional oath that you give for Attorney General, says that you will perform the office of Attorney General to the best of your ability and according to law. Now, if Jack Conway can't keep it as Attorney General, how in the world, Jamie, can we trust him to follow the constitutional oath on December the 8th of 2015 if he's the next governor?
I agree completely with you, Will T. We cannot trust him. He does not need to be governor. His most important responsibility as Attorney General is to uphold the Constitution of Kentucky. The voters made it clear in 2004, and I was in the General Assembly when we passed the bill to put the amendment on the ballot by a 2-to-1 margin. As Matt said, by a 2-to-1 margin, the voters of Kentucky approved the last constitutional amendment, which clearly stated same-sex marriages would not be legal in Kentucky, nor would we recognize same-sex marriages performed in other states. So Jack Conway failed to uphold the Constitution, and I agree. I do not think we can trust him to be governor.
So bigotry is still alive and well in 2015 in Kentucky, and Jack Conway just changed his mind last year on this issue, and good for him because he's actually taken a step towards equality, towards integration. If we were living in the Civil Rights Act, Jack Conway just last year said, okay, black people can now live in our schools peacefully. But Will T. Scott, James Comer, Matt Bevin, and Hal Heiner are all still stuck. No, we don't want, we got our schools, they got their schools, let's just keep it all separate. Will T. Scott expands about what he wants to do when it comes to building more prisons. So when it comes to building more prisons, what he wants to do is that he wants, he's saying that right now it costs $100,000 to build a prison per person per bed. $100,000. That's what we're spending our money on. And he says that you could actually make it for about $6,500 per person. And then he says you put them through the wars twice. Right? You put them through the wars twice. You put them through the system and you fuck them over. And you keep fucking them over until they eventually snap out of it.
What your plan is?
Our medium security prisons cost us about $100,000 per bed. And by my calculations, based upon the Campbell County minimum security facility they've built most recently, I think I can build minimum security beds for about $6,500. And it costs us $19,000, $29,000 to manage each of the prisons per year in these institutions. I think we could take all that savings and we could actually build high schools and colleges in a nice minimum security facility, put in counselors, psychiatrists, peer counselors, and psychologists, and using a word, I just say I'll wash them twice, is what I mean. I run them through and say they'll be in that minimum security for 1 to 10 years if they failed our drug courts. But I run them through and I give them 2 chances, and these are nonviolent people, non-sexual predatory people. I can increase the recovery rate up to 70%, and with my other programs, keep them in recovery. Kentucky's safe again.
So Will T. Scott is the one who is in favor of drug courts for the kids. But when it came to the issue of legalizing marijuana, he had actually took a progressive stance and says if the science was for it, then he was for it. But he's the man that actually started the drug courts for the kids. But he did have a son who almost got fucked over by the system. And so since he had a son that was almost fucked over by the system, he understands that perhaps the drug courts and the system doesn't actually help anybody, and he helped get his son off of those charges, just like Jack Conway did with his brother, allegedly.
As for Mr. Heiner. Mr. Heiner, you have stated that you are a supporter of Second Amendment rights, but when you were a city councilman, you voted to restrict the ability for concealed carry gun owners to carry into city buildings. You have stated that you're against tolling in Northern Kentucky, but you supported the referendum that led to the tolling authority in Louisville. You have stated before the Chamber of Commerce that you were in favor of keeping the Connect program, but now you state that you're against it. So given your flip-flopping nature over the course of the last couple of years, what would give the voters in Big Blue Nation and in Kentucky in general any confidence that you're actually of the caliber needed to lead this state forward?
Well, Matt, what would give them confidence is your nonstop mischaracterizations of my policy positions. I have been consistent. I will say on Second Amendment rights, I've received the highest rating from the NRA. I'm a life member. I'm a hunter. Most of quite frankly, the meat our family eats is deer meat. I've harvested on our farm.
Matt Bevin asked Hal Heiner about his flip-flopping. He points out that Hal Heiner thought that it was voted that guns cannot be in public buildings in Louisville. So Louisville banned guns in public buildings. And he says that makes him a flip-flopper. He's not pro-gun. If you don't allow people to walk in government buildings with a gun, you're not pro-gun. Then he also pointed out that he was for the tolls, against the tolls. And that's an important thing. Hal Heiner actually comes back pretty strong and says that he's not going to be like Matt Bevin with a knee-jerk position and just unplug, connect, and then throw 350,000 Kentuckians off out into the streets.
And there will be no infringements on gun rights in Kentucky.
Did you vote?
With me as governor.
Did you vote?
Mr. Bevin, let him answer.
Yeah. Secondly, you were talking about Connect. There has been no flip-flop. Different than you, I am not willing to kick 330,000 people to the curb and destroy the healthcare system that's available in 75% of Kentucky today on a knee-jerk position that you've taken.
All right, finally, Mr. Comer, you have a question for anyone, and what is it?
I'm going to pick Hal Heiner. Hal, I've traveled the state for 4 years as Commissioner of Agriculture. I've traveled the state extensively for 8 months. I think the consensus among the people of this state, especially over the last 24 hours, is that you're the Christian Leitner of Kentucky politics. If you see an email that was sent from your running mate to this blogger, encouraging this blogger to contact all the Republican Party chairs and vice chairs of the state and spreading lies about me, coordinating, which is illegal and it's on its own, with this blogger, how would you react to that as the leader of your ticket with your running mate and your campaign staff?
Mr. Heiner, since 2 questions have gone to you, I will give you a minute to answer that.
Okay, thank you. And I'm not, maybe understand the exact charge here, but what I will say is that I think there's some new news out this morning that finds that your campaign's been right in the middle of it as well. So, because this issue's been swirling around forever. As I said before, I was unaware of any contact. I've made it clear to my campaign staff and those involved that we're going to focus. This is a very important time in Kentucky, and we're going to focus on where we can go in Kentucky. I'm not responsible for what any blogger or any other individual does in this state. When I heard what happened last fall, I've addressed it. But to insinuate that somehow we're behind this is totally and absolutely false. And it's not part of the campaign. It's not the campaign we've been running for 61 weeks, and not the campaign we'll be running these last 2 weeks.
And James Comer claims that Hal Heiner is the Christian Leitner of Kentucky politics, which makes no sense because Leitner actually beat UK in that game, and Jack Conway is from Duke University. So if there's anybody that's the Christian Leitner of Kentucky politics, it would be Jack Conway, and Christian Leitner won that game. So, just because Kentucky fans hate him because he made that game-winning shot, that doesn't mean he's a loser, and it doesn't mean he's a bad person. So I think the reference is really stupid, and he could have just said, he is a pig. He's a pig, or he soiled himself. He soiled the race, and now everybody has to live in this soiled bed. So, and it wasn't Hal Heiner did soil the bed, but it was Joe Girth. Joe Girth is Jerry Springer. Kentucky's media doesn't cover the issues, doesn't cover the policy, doesn't make the races interesting enough for people to be inspired to go out and to go vote. They basically say, well, who's got all the money? Well, he's going to win, this guy's going to lose, and they don't even talk to so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They, being that they control the narrative, they say, oh, he is irrelevant. Who gives a fuck about him? And then once they say that, then their readers say the exact same shit. Well, he's not serious. Why isn't he serious? He paid $500. He's going around making speeches. What about that isn't serious about running? Well, he doesn't have millions of dollars. He didn't kiss the Koch brothers' ass. He didn't suck corporate 1% bankers' dicks and get a bunch of money so he can buy these ads. That's what they're saying. Why we weren't serious. Oh, you're not being serious. No, we're being serious. Our name's on the ballot. In fact, I don't even have to really say anything. I put my name on the ballot, and I can go to job and, talk to people about politics if I want or not. My name's on the ballot. I've already done. Ralph Nader spent 50% of his monies, of the money that he got donated just to get on the ballot in all the states. So we already are on the ballot, and we have a 13%. We're polling at 13%, which means we're statistically significant. And I don't hate Joe Girth. I mean, Joe Girth is, he's a piece of shit. He cannot help but soil not just, the bed, but soil himself, soil everybody else, and everywhere that he walks. I mean, he's a piece of shit. He is literally a turd. So he soils himself just by existing. It's not Joe Girth's fault that he is white trash. It is not his fault that he is a obnoxious, psychopathic douchebag that cannot print the truth to save his life. It's not Joe Girth's fault. It's his mother's fault. Or 10% of Kentuckians are even going to go vote. So most Kentuckians don't even vote. They don't even give a shit to go vote. They don't care about the government. They don't care about living in a democratic republic or a civilization. They don't even care to do their duty. And if you're not a politician and you're not a citizen, what are you doing? Who are you? What are you doing? But the 10% low turnout rate is mostly the media's fault, the poor education, and we got the internet. So that means Kentuckians just don't know that they need to go do their duty. So we need to start voting. When poor people, poor Kentuckians, young Kentuckians start to vote, we'll get a better society. We'll get a better society when we get poor people and young people into positions of power. Working class people need to get into positions of power. We need to quit hating ourselves. Don't hate Will T. Scott. Hate the people that just throw money around. Hal Heiner is a much more despicable candidate than Will T. Scott. Will T. Scott is you all. Will T. Scott is Kentucky. You have to claim Will T. Scott just like you have to claim James Comer. And if you're going to fall in love with these outside carpetbaggers who just comes in here and throws a bunch of money everywhere, well, you're telling me exactly that's why you voted for Pennsylvania Rand. It's why you voted for Alabama Mitch. And now you're looking at somebody from New Hampshire or Wisconsin. And look what they did in Wisconsin. Scott Walker fucked the budget of Wisconsin up.
No.
If I don't win, I will support the Republican nominee unless it's proven that illegal activity occurred.
Mr. Scott.
Well, if one of these fellas is lucky enough to beat me, I'll support them, even if they made me mad. No problem.
Mr. Heiner.
Yes, we cannot have Jack Conway as governor. We've gone nowhere in 8 years. We're in trouble. We need a Republican governor, and I will.
Mr. Bevick.
Yes, any of the four of us at this table are far more qualified to be the next governor than Jack Conway, no question.